Hello, up to the Social Justice Forums. I am your host, Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. Now, if you're asking the question, what is the show all about? We bring you a forum discussing and providing deeper understanding of the issues and the inequities that many communities face. Things such as systemic inequalities, pressing social problems. Our guests provide multiple perspectives and insights, helping us to better understand and address these challenges. So we invite you to stay connected to us as the Social Justice Forum starts now. And welcome back. The Greenburger Center for Social and Criminal Justice is leading a transformative effort to reshape our approach to individuals with serious mental illnesses within the criminal justice system. Joining me today is the Executive Director of the Greenburger Center, Cheryl Roberts. And Cheryl, glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And when we talk about, the issue of mental illness, particularly when it comes to the criminal justice system, a lot can be said. From your perspective right now, how do you see things?
I think they're improving, but that's not probably saying much. The fact is, about half the people that are incarcerated have some kind of mental illness. Among women, that's even higher. And for the better part of 50, 60 years, we have been taking people out of mental health psychiatric facilities and moving them, unfortunately, into homelessness or incarceration. And so we have a long way to go, but we're hoping that, some of the things the Greenburger Center is doing, and also the announcement made by Governor Hochul yesterday to put more money into supportive housing and things like opening or reopening hospital beds for those who are severely ill, will help.
How prevalent is this problem?
Within the criminal justice system, it's very prevalent. As I mentioned, about half the people who are incarcerated have a mental illness, and about 20% or so have a serious mental illness. And, prisons and jails are the worst place you could be if you have a mental illness. So, they require that you follow rules, that you behave a certain way. And sometimes with a mental illness that's certainly untreated, that makes it very difficult. And so this population tends to break rules, not intentionally, but because they can't help it, and they stay longer, they cost more money, and they don't come out any better. So it's a real concern within the criminal justice population.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about the Hope House? Because I think our viewers would definitely find this very enlightening.
Sure. Hope House is a real project of love for Francis Greenburger. His oldest son, a little bit more than a decade ago, was involved with the criminal justice system and also has some significant mental disorders, mental illness. And at that time, there was no place for him to be diverted, even though the judge and the DA at the time were also looking for an alternative to incarceration. Because of the nature of his charges, no one felt comfortable in diverting him. So his son went to jail at Rikers, about 2 years there, and then to an upstate prison, and was never diverted. We, though, began the Hope House project and the Greenburger Center to try and provide that kind of alternative to incarceration residential facility that judges and DAs and most importantly, people with the lived, condition would have a place to be diverted to and hopefully get better rather than worse in jail and prison.
And when we talk about really diversion, I'm really stunned by a number. And well, let me talk about this number first of all that I found out. Comptroller Brad Lander reported like 1 in 5 people coming out of Rikers Island has a serious mental illness, and that was a recent analysis. That is quite alarming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it corresponds to the numbers that I quoted earlier. It really is astounding that our answer to mental health care apparently for the last 50 years is incarceration, homelessness, or the morgue. If you have serious mental illness, especially if you're a person of color. People of color are more impacted by the justice system, and if you have mental illness, that makes it worse. Look at, Daniel Prude as an example of someone in a mental health crisis, a person of color who was, tragically shot during a crisis.
Yeah. So walk me back a little bit to the Hope House. I want to connect all this here together. When you
Mhm,
have a voluntary program,
mhm.
that's a great opportunity for people to just, pretty much jump in. But the word voluntary and seeing people volunteer to say, hey, I'll do this. What's it like? And what's that response like?
Well, first I have to tell you that we've just recently broken ground. So it's going to take about 18 months to build this facility. And it took us 10 years to get to this point, which is another story in itself. So I can't tell you exactly, in terms of a person's actual experience yet, but the way it's supposed to work is that first of all, the defendant, the person who's involved, has to be willing to go to Hope House as opposed to going to prison. And with this population, really their only option is prison. So if they are competent to understand what's happening, they want to go for treatment, that's the first step. Then the DA also has to agree, and the judge. And if those three parties all agree that this person is willing, is able to go to Hope House, which is a residential treatment facility where they really don't come and go often. They can go with a peer at first, and eventually that's the hope, but they stay on site. They get their treatment there for up to 2 years. So it's a longer term residential stay. There is monitoring that's involved. They have to voluntarily agree to, for example, wear a monitoring bracelet um, and to abide by all the rules. And there will be security people on staff at all times. Those are some of the extra seatbelts, if you will. Those are some of the extra security measures that were not available to Francis's son. And one of the biggest reasons why the DA and judge didn't agree to a diversion. So we're trying to make this a therapeutic environment where people are in community, they are not incarcerated, they can get their services right on site, they can learn skills like um, making lunch and making meals, maintaining a residence, and job skills, and become stable, and then be stepped down into the community. So it's very simple. It's amazing that it's taken so long to get online, and we're not there yet. But that's the essence of Hope House, to provide a secure, safe environment where people can go voluntarily to get treatment rather than punishment, and then safely step into the community and hopefully not come back. I mean, that's our goal. We don't want people to come back into the system.
Cheryl, you're being generous here because I know when we talk about the time that it's taken to really get this onboarded and offline, it's been quite, been quite considerable. A lot of hurdles. I think getting everybody to be in agreement.
But the people that were in agreement from the beginning and who saw the value of this immediately were the people of the Bronx. I mean, we searched all over the city for a location, and very frankly, I didn't want to go to the Bronx because I felt like the Bronx had enough of these kinds of facilities, and I felt like, you know, we shouldn't always put all of the same kinds of uses in the same neighborhoods. So we looked different places, and we found a place in the Bronx. And the first thing we did before we did anything was to go to the community board and say, look, we have bought this property. It used to be a former men's shelter, homeless shelter. We are interested in doing this Hope House project, but we're not going to do it if you don't want us here. We're not going to continue this project unless we have your partnership in this. And we spent 8 months with the community board and going over their concerns. And in the end, they said yes on two conditions. One was, we don't want people accused of sex offenses, because at the time it was next door to an after school day program. And I said, I understand that. And the second is that they wanted 4 beds reserved for people from the Bronx, because the Bronx has typically the highest incarceration rate. Sometimes Brooklyn, the two boroughs go back and forth. And I said, absolutely. If we can, reserve a bed, if there are 2 people, one from Bronx, one from somewhere else, and we're only taking from the 5 boroughs, by the way, we'll give, for up to at least 4 beds, we'll give the preference to the people who are coming from the Bronx. So I just have to say that because I think the people of the Bronx have been amazing in their ability to welcome us, and their willingness, I should say, to welcome us, and understand right from the start that this impacted them, and they were willing to open up, as well as all the elected officials, Congressman Richie Torres when he was a council member, Vanessa Gibson when she was in the council and now as borough president, Melissa Mark Viverito. So many people have from the Bronx have supported this project. Where we didn't get the support, frankly, was really at the state level. It took them a long time, and I have to say, Governor Kathy Hochul's administration really pushed this project forward. And so I think we owe a lot also to her.
Yeah. So you mentioned about preferences for a minute. I want to get an opportunity also to say that I know that veterans also have the opportunity for preferences. Share a little bit about that.
Right. We wanted to give not only the Bronx folks preference, but also veterans, because so many times people who serve come back with some serious mental illness and PTSD, which can sometimes lead to criminal justice involvement. So we felt that was also important.
Yeah, we know that so many cases across the nation where we see perfect case and example of people who have mental illness but not really being able to have that dealt with at this level. Having diversion in local areas, what's that mean for both community and then also for the life of the offender?
98% of people who are incarcerated come back out. Very few people stay in forever, and appropriately so, because other countries have far shorter terms of sentence than we do, and their communities are safe. But having said that, 98% of people come out, and so you want them to be in the best shape possible to re-enter the community. And we know that people with mental illness who enter the carceral system don't always come out any better, and sometimes far worse. And so to have the ability to be diverted, to get treatment, to get job skills and life skills, and then to be stepped down in the community with our partners, like Osborne and Cases and Fortune and so many of the other nonprofits that do good work in the Bronx and throughout the city. I think that's going to benefit not only the incarcerated person and returning citizen at that point, but also the communities in which they will reintegrate.
Talk a little about treatment options as we look around. There are so many, but the treatment options that are being offered right now, what are
they? At Hope House, they will. It's a combination. It's supposed to be what they call a milieu therapy model, also based on the Fountain House model. Fountain House is a treatment model that really came out of the deinstitutionalization movement in the 60s. There's a Fountain House clubhouse in Manhattan, and they work on something called the work order day. So part of therapy is not you go and sit in the room for 50 minutes and you tell the therapist, your deepest, darkest, which is definitely appropriate and needed. But in addition to that piece, a work order day therapeutic milieu model means that when you get up in the morning, you're going to help make breakfast. Same with lunch, same with cleaning. And it's all done in relation to other people. So in connecting with people in the kitchen while you make your dinner, there's a therapist there, or a counselor there who's helping you navigate issues that may come up, interpersonal issues or issues with your mental health or mental illness that, you need help working through so that you are successful when you leave. So it's not only the traditional kinds of therapy and, of course, medication management and an opportunity to meet with a psychiatrist, but it's that more kind of minute-to-minute, day-to-day opportunity for you to engage with your fellow residents, and also the counselors on staff who will be there 24 hours a day to help manage situations as they come up.
Got to talk about the hard part. If a person decides not to complete the program, what happens there?
Right. If a person decides not to complete, or frankly, if they become violent or threaten violence, because we can't have violence, even threatened in this facility, that has to be a safe environment, they will then be taken back to court, and the judge will decide at that point what to do. We don't really have a decision in necessarily next steps, although we definitely do have the ability to say, we're no longer willing to take this person if they would, for example, hurt someone. We want to give as many chances as we can, but there are some times when we will have to say also, we can no longer serve this person. And then it's up to the judge to decide, should there be a different program, or should they then, go to prison?
Yeah. How do you feel the impact of this program will be played out in the lives of so many?
Of course, we hope that it will be beneficial to them and their communities and their families, and give them a second chance. And give them, unfortunately, oftentimes what I hear is that people don't get the mental health care they need until they're arrested. So given that situation, we hope that they will benefit by getting finally quality treatment they will then continue throughout their life as needed.
And when we talk about reentry into the community, obviously that's huge, right? That's a goal. And to have reentry into the community. Give me some of the barriers that you anticipate seeing with reentry, because some reentry just is not smooth, and there are some that are.
Right, right. I could be wishful thinking, but I hope that part, and I think that part will go a bit smoother for us than maybe in other areas or facilities, because right from the beginning, we went to the large providers of reentry services now. So I mentioned some of them before: Fortune, Osborne, Casis, Harbor House. And we asked them, what they needed, how we could expand the continuum of care, because the folks that will be treating, they can't treat right now. So all of the heads of these organizations either have been or are still on our board of advisors. And we plan from day one to start thinking about reentry and to be in communication with our partners in what's called the New York City ATI, Alternative to Incarceration Coalition. We're a coalition of, I believe, 11 groups that all work together. And so I'm hoping that we avoid some of the pitfalls that maybe have occurred in the past, because we began right from the beginning asking those reentry providers, how do we fit in? How do we all work together? And the last thing I'll say is that, Francis Greenburger, of course, the founder of the Greenburger Center, and we didn't just start the Greenburger Center. First of all, he went through in his family several years looking at and watching and being involved with his son. But Francis and I also spent 6 months, maybe even more, touring New York City, New York, and the country, looking at different facilities, talking to people, asking questions. And so I think that the way we entered the space, the way we've been trying to reach out to our partners, and our commitment to successful reentry will help avoid some of the issues that you are alluding to.
Yeah, and we talk about a couple of things. Number one, landing right, I should say, after going through this process, hoping the diversion can actually be profitable in the lives of people. We know what those chances are. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. For yourself, how do you approach it on a day-to-day basis, knowing that, some days it literally can be just like rolling dice?
Clearly, obviously, we're not open yet, so I don't know how it is exactly going to go, but I think we'll take it day by day, as you say, and we are going to have a very rich staff, on site, probably more than most other facilities have, because of the nature of the population we're taking. And I will never forget one of my board of advisors who ran for 30 years mental health reentry and diversion facilities said that if you have someone that suddenly decompensates, that suddenly becomes violent, it most likely means that the staff, that something hasn't been observed, that you've missed something, because he felt that if you are engaged meaningfully with the residents, you from day to day, you will understand and you will see problems, brewing and coming up. So my hope is that, yes, good days, bad days, but, tragic days, days where things really spin out of control, that I don't believe those days will happen at Hope House. Ups and downs, sure, but the big, change, the big issues that people might be concerned about, I just don't think that with all the staff we have and the training and the emphasis we've placed on very engaged programming, I think we will avoid those kinds of emergency situations.
Yeah. I want to also have the opportunity to talk about security and through bail bonds supervision. How does that work?
So that's a great question. And I'll tell you, I was a licensed bond agent and used to bail people out for a nonprofit upstate, a nonprofit bail fund. So bond agents can be used for good. They're not all, what you may see on TV. We are going to require that the defendant ask for bail. Even under the bail reform laws, there is a provision in the law that allows the defendant to ask for a dollar bail or a nominal amount of bail. This is done oftentimes when someone knows they're going to be pleading guilty to something and they will be getting incarceration as part of their sentence. They might want to ask the judge to set bail so that they are, even if it's $1, they're sitting in a local jail. They're kind of what they call clocking their time. So when they are sentenced to whatever, 3 months, if they've been in jail before the sentence is imposed, they will get time served. Mm-hmm. So the significance of that is when you ask the judge to set bail with Hope House, we're going to be having a bond agent basically pay that bail. And then the bond agent can actually, if the person for whom the bail was posted doesn't agree to the terms of the bail, the bond agent can actually take that person, physically take them back to court. Now that may seem like a bad thing, but the alternative is if the person is released from a facility and is out there on their own and is decompensating, is not safe, then the police will be called. And then chances are things could get a lot worse and maybe deadly. So our bond agents will be trained. They will understand their role. They will understand mental health, how to de-escalate, and they will, our expectation and requirements will be they will take folks back that need to go back, who say, I hate it here, I want to go back, or I've become violent, or for whatever reason they want to go back or leave without permission or with a peer. Then the bond agent, rather than the police, can take that person back. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does make sense there. And so for people who want more information, what do they do about getting connected?
So at this point, we have a website, thegreenburgercenter.org or greenburgercenter.org, and they can go on that site and click at the top the page for Hope House, and they can learn more about that. There's also contact information on our website, and they should feel free, to reach out, and we'll get back to them.
Yeah, excited?
Yeah, excited and impatient, I think. I want to get it open.
Long time coming, right? So as you get closer and closer, I can tell. You just want to get those doors open and let's get it started.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, it's been great talking to you, Cheryl. Cheryl Roberts, who's the executive director for the Greenburger Center for Social and Criminal Justice. Talk about diversion and Hope House 2025. Looking forward to hopefully what will be a great asset to our community. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for being with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
All righty. We are taking a quick break, but guess what? We're going to come back with more right after this.
Congratulations, BronxNet, on your 30th anniversary. Bronx Best is my show, and I had a great experience being able to bring my story to the Bronx Network. Really changed my life. And I look forward to growing with the network, and I think that it's a wonderful place to grow and learn. And I think that everyone should take advantage of all the wonderful programs and things that go on here.
Welcome back. Asian American women represent about under 1% of C-suite leadership in corporate America. Our first guest's new book recognizes the unique challenges AAPI women face, including a potential lack of skills in advocating for themselves. Now, the book aims to empower Asian and South Asian women by equipping them with the essential tools needed to become their own cheerleaders and achieve remarkable success. Joining us now to tell us her point of view on this matter is the corporate leadership coach and author of Be Your Own Cheerleader, Neelu Kaur. And thank you so much for being with us, Neelu.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. So we talk about this here, we look at the numbers and we say the numbers definitely don't add up. And when you look at those numbers, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
There's a lack of us representing. And we have the skills and we have the intellect and we have the capabilities to be the C-suite, but we just don't get the opportunities.
And when we talk about ethnicity, we talk about demographics such as that, under 1%, what can we attribute this to?
I believe it's because we're not skilled with speaking up. So what happens for Asians and South Asians, whether we are born in those collective we-based cultures or we are raised by immigrants from those cultures, what happens is Asian and South Asians are very we, so it's collective. So it's all about group harmony. You keep your head down, you just work really hard, and you assume that the work is going to speak up for itself. And when you come to corporate America, which is very I-based, so North America is very I-based, and so you talk about yourself, your credentials, and when you come from these collective cultures, it's just not intuitive, it's not something we were taught or modeled. And so when we get it to work, it's really challenging for us.
So you got some work ahead of you, right?
Yeah.
So you're out here and you're educating, you're also the author of a book, and you're educating on this particular part of leadership. What is it that you want people to know when it comes to this?
I feel like my main message is to let women know that they have the resources internally to know when to turn up the we and when to turn up the I. So I like to think of it as like a speedometer in a car. So on one side is we and one side is I. And for those of us that live and are very comfortable in the we, I want us to flex and move towards the I. So I want us to talk openly about our credentials, our accomplishments, all of the things that we do. I think it's very viscerally uncomfortable for those of us that come from collective cultures. And so my message in the corporate landscape is to really help women who struggle with this to speak up and advocate.
It's hard though, right? When you come from a we,
Yes.
I sometimes speak in third person we, right?
Yes.
And I do have a hard time sometimes getting to a place of I. I've got some friends that say, listen, you need to say I more often. You need to really talk about what you
Right.
do. It becomes a challenge because you become so, you're the servant, if you will.
Right.
And you become used to being that. What's the key in making that transition from we to I?
One is self-awareness. So knowing that you have this internal dial, right? And so when you are in we situations, you talk about shared deliverables, shared outcomes. When you are in I situations, you talk about yourself, your credentials. So for example, when I am in a team and I'm coaching a team or I'm entrenched in an organization, I will use words like our deliverables, our outcomes, shared deliverables, right? And then when you're on the I side, you talk about yourself, your credentials. And for me, that's in sales development or business development calls, I have to talk more about all of my accomplishments. And I think when we have that barometer internally or this dial, we have to know when to navigate between the we and the I.
For yourself, obviously, it's been a long journey, right?
Right.
And talk about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I absolutely suck at self-advocacy.
Really? No.
Yes, no, I really do. And I think those of us that teach, we
Right.
need what we teach the most, right? And so for me, I just remember getting downsized or getting fired. Like I had a series of downsizing, series of getting fired, and I never knew what it was because I'm a hard worker, really smart, but I kept getting fired or downsized. And so when specifically in 2013, I was downsized from a large company, and I remember when I was escorted back to my desk, I was escorted as if I was a criminal. They were like, you have 5 seconds or 10 seconds to grab your belongings, and then we have to escort you out of the building. And I looked around, and everyone around me was part of this clique. They were white, they were Caucasian, male, female, and I just remember thinking, they're part of a group or something, they're doing something I don't know how to do. And I think in that moment, I sort of had an aha that they are their own cheerleaders and I just really suck at it. And so that was sort of the onset, that started my journey into figuring out how do I speak up? And then since then, I've helped so many women, thousands of women speak up and self-advocate for themselves.
There have been benefits, though, of growing up in a collective culture, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, so what are the benefits that you take away from growing up in a collective
Yeah,
culture?
you know, one of the things is we share everything.
Right,
and
right.
Sharing is more comfortable than not sharing. We take care of the elderly. There's a lot of things in we-based cultures, much more collective, much more group harmony, and I think that there's definitely great attributes there. I just want us to flex more in the I if we live in North America.
Yeah, but the problem is sometimes people feel as though we know too many I people.
Yes.
And they're kind of narcissistic,
Correct.
right? You know?
Correct.
So you don't want to become that. And the danger is, if I keep becoming this I person, am I doing too much? Am I right?
Right.
So how do I guard against that? Because that's the internal clock of saying, oh, you know what? I don't want to become this person that I resent and I look at and I despise.
I have yet to meet an Asian or a South Asian that's narcissistic in that way. Like I say, if you're asking me if it's coming across narcissistic, it's not. It's that we don't do it, and so just practicing it may feel boastful, but it's something that we must do to excel in corporate America.
So for yourself, you take the time of really educating people. You've authored a book, Be Your Own Cheerleader, right? And sometimes you can't be your own cheerleader because you're spending too much time on the sidelines.
Right.
So what about the sidelines? How do I get off the sidelines and become that my own cheerleader?
Yeah, I think there's an I in team. Many of us are told that we have to work collaboratively, and that's true, yes, and we also need to share that we've done certain aspects of work, right? So it's like having that conversation in your performance review, conversation with your manager, just openly speaking about your own individual accomplishments in that team or group deliverable. And it's something that we're just not comfortable doing.
Yeah. So we talk about engaging your interruption shield.
Yes.
I want to get to that.
Yes.
So explain to our viewers exactly how do you engage and what is engaging your interruption shield?
So interruption shields are words or phrases that we use to jump back in conversations. So what happens for Asian and South Asian women is that oftentimes when we're in a conference room, we're getting interrupted. We're not, our voices aren't as loud maybe, and we get interrupted. So these interruption shields are ways for us to jump back in the conversation because we don't want others to take credit for our work. And it's happened so much for me, and it's happened to all of the women I've coached where others have taken credit of their work. So interruption shields are words like, if I may, can we circle back to, I just mentioned this 5 minutes ago, can we circle back to it, right? So these phrases that we can use, and the more we use them, the more comfortable we're gonna be in using those interruption shields.
Yeah. Again, that's very hard, right?
Right.
And I guess somebody would say from this perspective, AAPI culture, why does it become hard? Because you talk about living in a collective culture, and that collective culture teaches us some things, and we carry those things for a minute, and
Right.
sometimes they're just hard to get rid of.
I think the reason that it's so hard is because we're taught to keep our head down and just to work hard, and the work will speak for itself, and the work never speaks for itself in corporate America. You have to be able to grab that bullhorn and to really advocate for yourself.
What's it been like for you in this journey? Because here it is, you're talking and you're teaching, you're
Right.
training, right? But then you still have to navigate these spaces, whether it's to do the training or whether or not it's just your own interaction in corporate America.
Yeah.
What's the journey been like for you?
It has been challenging, and I have my own techniques that I do before getting on a business development call, because for me, those are the most challenging, where I have to speak openly about myself and my credentials. So I have a whole routine that I do to prep for those calls, and I think I coach all of the women that I work with to figure out their own routine or something that feels comfortable to them before they get into the room for their performance review conversation or before they're about to get interviewed for a job or a role.
So in the words of Dr. Phil, how's that working for you?
It's working great. I have a thriving practice, so it is working pretty well.
And so for people who come, and take advantage of the work that you're doing, the body of work that you're doing, it is a way that you can say, hey, I want to improve myself in the area of being able to effectively communicate and also market myself. Are we seeing improvements in the area of people marketing themselves and also corporate recognizing that?
I actually don't know from an Asian and South Asian perspective how that's going in companies. I just know that there's a lack of us representing, and so I'm here to help those of us that don't know how to speak up and self-advocate.
Yeah. And so for yourself, self-advocacy is very important, very crucial. What are some of the don'ts in the self-advocacy world?
Like what not to do?
Yeah, what not to do.
I think, one of the things that happens a lot for Asians and South Asians is we have really amazing ideas and we don't speak up in the moment. So the don't is, don't wait for the conversation to be over. Don't wait till the very end of the project when you're about to be finished. It's like step in right in that moment and actually make sure that your manager or those around you know what you accomplished to accomplish that goal.
Yeah. Also, you talk about beating burnout and thrive, right?
Yes.
I want to talk about burnout because burnout is real. I
Yes.
think there's so many people who experience burnout, and the worst part is when you experience burnout, you don't even know you're burnt out.
Right.
So,
right.
But talk to me about beat burnout and thrive.
So burnout, a lot of us through COVID, we're jumping from meeting to meeting. We are not allowing ourselves to really take time to synthesize information. And so burnout is feeling overwhelmed. Burnout is sort of having those Sunday night scaries when you are dreading waking up and going to work the next day, or not even going, because a lot of us don't commute anymore, right? So there's signs of burnout. And I think for Asians and South Asians, when you don't speak up, the fact that you're struggling in certain ways, that is a recipe for burnout.
So when we talk about burnout, talk to me a little bit more about it, because when you say like, hey, I'll approach it from this perspective, that burnout can sometimes last for a long period of time, right? How do I get off of that place from getting out of burnout? What are some of the things I can do to get out of burnout?
I mean, it's so simple, but the one question I always tell all of the people I coach is ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? Because what happens oftentimes is maybe we're not hydrated, maybe we need to eat, maybe we need to not be in a meeting, but we're in a meeting because everyone invited us to this meeting in our group, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really looking in your calendars, figuring out, do I actually need to be in this meeting? And then asking yourself in the moment, how do I get rid of this overwhelm? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to take a walk outside? What are some things that I can do in this moment to really alleviate the burnout I'm experiencing?
Yeah. So in the work that you do, you deal with a lot of cultural biases, right?
Right.
And helping people to overcome the cultural biases. For somebody who may not know about them, what are some of those biases that exist?
Some of the biases that exist for Asians and South Asians are really around that we're really good in certain things, but not good in other things. So we're supposed to be really good in math and science. I'm one of the Asians that is not good in math and science. So there's these stereotypes that we're good in certain things, but we're not good in creative things, right? We're not good with communication. We're not good with certain things. And I think when you fall into that in organizations, you might get tasked with more of the math and science types of roles, or you might be conditioned to think that's all you can do. So you might be in engineering, you might be in something that really requires more math and science, but you're actually more creative than you're allowed to really let yourself think.
Talk to me about the three components of profitability here. I got this thing: productivity, purpose, and peace.
Yeah.
And you speak about this,
Yes.
right? So how do they become profitable, first of all?
I think until we can be peaceful internally, we cannot do anything productively.
Okay.
So we have to first figure out our own mental health and mental well-being before we can go out into the world and do anything. And that aligns to our purpose, right? So we're calm, we're centered, we're balanced. We can then go in the world and figure out what our purpose is, and then we're going to help either our own businesses or the businesses we consult in or work in thrive and become profitable.
So that peace is very important, right? Because I think you can't get too far without the peace component.
Right.
What is the key in that peace component?
What do I need in this moment?
Yeah.
Right? Moment by moment awareness of what you need. And I know we are all so busy. We're in a rat race. This is hustle culture, especially in New York City. But I think we need to take a step back and really ask ourselves, what do I need in this moment? And it's as simple as that.
What's it like for you when you start asking these questions and start driving through in people? Because I think, to a certain extent, you're picking, you're digging deep in. And sometimes people say, you know what, I've really come to a full realization that maybe I do need to work on this, or I've been this way, but in order for me to succeed, I got to make that change. And we know that for so many people, culturally, it's hard to make that pivot.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you, so do you agree? Yeah, agree.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, regardless of what culture we come from, until our mental health is not taken care of, we cannot be out in the world doing productive things. So I think that is the goal of everyone, whether you're Asian or South Asian, and all of the audience here that listens, is that your mental health is the most important thing.
Yeah. So for people who want to get connected, what do they do to be connected to your book, your work, your workshops?
Yeah, so website, nilukaur.com. LinkedIn is my most primary source, social media, and then also Instagram. And you can find my book, Be Your Own Cheerleader, on Amazon.
So how long did it take you to write the book?
5 years.
Really?
Yeah, from start to finish.
And how much of it was basically like deconstructing and for yourself? Because, you had to look at self in this as well and say, there's some qualities I had to get out of me.
When I was thinking about the book, I thought I wanted this book to encompass who I am. So it's broken into 3 sections: psychological, spiritual, and cultural. And so those are the 3 things that make me who I am in the workplace. And so that's what that's the blueprint that I used when I was writing the book.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to get a hold of it, how do they go about doing that?
Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, all of the places you can grab books.
Yeah. And for you in the future, what are your future goals, and what do you have coming up?
My future goals are to take a sabbatical to start book 2.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you give me an idea what book 2 is about?
I have no idea.
Okay. Here I am looking for the exclusive.
I know. I'm too busy working. I really would like to take a little break from work to focus and work on my mental health as well and focus on book 2.
So, but you see, book 2 is definitely in the future.
It is, absolutely.
Well, Neely, I want to thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Neely Cora, and I want to let you know we're taking a quick break. Guess what? She gave you the ways that you can get the book, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, those places, and check her out. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. And we are back. According to the Economic Policy Institute, wage theft strips American workers of a staggering $50 billion annually. Our next guest explores the dimensions of this problem, particularly its disproportionate impact on undocumented immigrant workers who face heightened vulnerability and often lack avenues to address these injustices. Here now is the director of Justicia Lab, and we are pleased to have pleased to have with us Rodrigo Camarena, and he's here with us, and we thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, Daren. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for being with us. And when we talk about this thing called wage theft, obviously we want to get right at it because there's $50 billion as we talk about, but those numbers disproportionately fall.
That's right. $50 billion is a conservative estimate, and that's money stolen from people who rightfully earned it. And this, wage theft, when we talk about it, we mean, minimum wage not being paid, overtime not being paid, sick leave, et cetera. And this is a problem that's huge in America. It disproportionately impacts low-wage workers, immigrants, especially those that are undocumented, and women. And so it's a big problem, and it's something that we need to recognize as a country and as a state.
How much does it really pick up the pace a little bit more, given the fact that right now we just got new laws coming in talking about an increase to minimum wage, and so a lot more to keep on your radar?
Yeah, the increase of the state minimum wage is a welcome development, but the federal minimum wage is not increased in decades. And so even while we have these increases, it's very difficult for low-wage workers, folks that are undocumented or vulnerable workers to demand these wages. Oftentimes they're unaware of changes to minimum wage or unaware of their rights, especially as immigrants, as to what wages they are owed and entitled to. And so there's a big problem in actually implementing these changes and informing workers about their rights.
When we talk about wage theft, obviously a lot of people know what it means, but can you give us some clear examples for somebody who may not be so familiar as to how wage theft is occurring as we speak?
Sure. In some industries, it's actually more common to experience wage theft than actually be paid what you're owed. And this happens for a number of reasons. Maybe you get a job that says, hey, I'll pay you $500 for a week's work. And when you tally the total number of hours that you've worked, you realize that, hey, instead of earning what you hoped you were going to earn, you're working overtime, you're working during lunch breaks, you're working on the weekends, and those $500 come out to $10 an hour when you total the number of hours that you've worked. So it's difficult to spot, and as a worker, especially one that's looking for work as a day laborer or in a sector that doesn't have a lot of tracking of hours, it's really tough to know how much you were rightfully owed.
Yeah. Rodrigo, I want to talk about this here because it's often said that if a worker actually wins a case, sometimes you just don't get the money anyway.
That's right. That's one of the major problems with this issue, and that's that even when you have the courage to demand what you're owed and you go through the rightful channels with the Department of Labor in New York State, it's really tough to get money back. It takes months, if not years, to investigate claims. It's really difficult to hold employers accountable. They often fold up shop, declare bankruptcy, and create a new LLC. and just do the same thing over and over again. So enforcement is a huge problem when it comes to reclaiming stolen wages.
Yeah, and you say that many times you do see businesses, and how often is that businesses will just say, listen, you know what? I'm not going to pay this. I'm shutting it down, start again, and really with no retribution.
That's right. Unfortunately, it's all too common. We really need to hold employers accountable, and we need to look beyond the existing assets and entities that they hold, and consider that these employers often, just change names or create new companies and repeat the same issues. So there's a lot the state can do, and I know a lot of advocates around the state are hoping to make changes to the wage enforcement rules in the state.
I know we're in 2024, but talk to me a little bit about COVID and how that actually played a role as to a lot of what we're seeing today. Because during COVID, I imagine things got heightened quite rapidly.
Yeah, the COVID era has really impacted all workers, but especially, essential workers, many of which are, undocumented immigrants, folks from New York City's Black and Brown communities. And, this really resulted in higher rates of exploitation for workers. Low-wage workers in particular were severely impacted by the pandemic. Many lost their jobs. Many were struggling to regain employment, in particular in the service industries, in the construction industries. And so now that we're slowly inching out of the pandemic and returning to pre-pandemic employment, I think we're finding that a lot of workers, are demanding more out of their employers, or demanding more protections, but still find themselves struggling to get employment at the rates that they were before pandemic.
So how do we really deal with this problem here? I mean, obviously enforcement is critical if you want to turn things around. Policy is also huge. But from your perspective, Rodrigo, what are some of the key things that we can be doing right now to help turn this thing around?
Enforcement by the state is a huge, I think would provide a lot of relief to workers. Public education on wage and hour rules in the state would also help tremendously, especially non-English languages, and especially targeting the most vulnerable workers, again, low-wage workers, immigrants, and women. From our perspective, we've built a digital tool to combat wage theft called Reclamo that helps expedite the process for non-lawyers assisting workers with the filing and documenting of wage theft claim. So we're using technology, and we're trying to empower civil society to pursue these claims and not rely on an expensive attorney or deep knowledge of the law. These are our rights. It should be easy for any of us to access them. And so we're trying to make a dent in the problem by using technology and by training and empowering non-lawyers like myself to play a role in tackling wage theft.
When we look at states involved, we got Florida, Ohio, Illinois. These are like three of the big ones, and then New York coming in fourth when it comes. When we talk about Florida, I think I can understand Illinois, but then I got that correlation between New York and Ohio. New York's not, we know the metropolis, but Ohio really coming in there.
Yeah, I can't speak much to Ohio and why the rates of wage theft are so high, but I know that a lot of this depends on the size of the state and the population of the state, but also the degree by which to which these rules are enforced. And so, while New York is one of the largest states in the country, we still have a long way to go when it comes to enforcing these rules and laws and helping people get money back.
So let's talk a little bit about the tool that you're using to really assist workers and to get their money back, and the boots on the ground work that you're doing right now. For people who may not be so familiar with the work that's actually being done by your organization, talk to us about it.
Sure. So we at Justicia Lab help create digital tools for immigrants and their advocates. We're a not-profit digital tech incubator that develop Reclamo in partnership with workplace justice advocates at Make the Road New York and other worker centers. And we ask the question, how can technology play a role here? How can the latest advances in digital tools help you do your work better? And the result of that was Reclamo, which is a digital tool to combat wage theft. It helps any non-lawyer help a worker understand if they've been a victim of wage theft, answers plain language questions to complete a New York State Department of Labor complaint form. And it also helps workers write demand letters and have a scripted demand conversation with an employer, which is one of the most effective ways of actually getting money back. That's having an advocate, speak on your behalf to an employer, cite the laws that were broken, and try to negotiate wages back.
Can you share with me a little bit about the immigration problem? Because we know that those who are dealing with immigration, particularly when it comes to wage theft, they are at the forefront of what we sometimes see in terms of not being able to recoup wages. How have you been able to deal with that for those persons who've had to deal with the immigration challenge?
For folks that are undocumented or are trying to pursue a form of relief, immigration relief, it's really tough to speak out and make yourself seen by enforcement agencies that are supposedly there to help you, protect your rights as workers. And so I think a lot of what we're trying to do in other workplace justice advocates are trying to do is educate and inform workers about their rights, let them know that their rights as workers are different from their rights as immigrants. If they're undocumented, that is, we all have rights in this country, even if you are pursuing a form of relief currently or already have a form of relief but not a U.S. citizen yet. And so I think there's a lot to do when it comes to public education and building trust. From our perspective, we're trying to do that by, working with trusted messengers and organizations throughout New York State to help people, reclaim stolen wages more quickly, more effectively.
The difference between the worker and the immigrant, obviously that's huge. That message getting out there, trying to really spread that message abroad. Talk to me about when you're out there, boots on the ground, dealing. How receptive are people to understanding that there are some resources that are actually out there that are available? Or are people just, pretty shy when it comes to just saying, listen, I'm just going to let it, as we say around the block, we're just going to let it rock out?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the answer, and that's the take that most people have. Sure, I got cheated by my employer, but I'm just going to find a new job. I'm just going to move on. It's not worth the fight. It's not worth the fight. And so it's a really tough message to drive home to them that it is worth it, that we can help, especially when the state agencies are so slow to respond and are so under-resourced. I think we have a long way to go. We're trying to do our part by using technology and equipping non-lawyers with tools to do their job more effectively. And luckily, since this project launched in 2022, we've helped file over $1 million in wage theft claims. We have a long way to go, but we're trying to do our part.
We talk about worker stories. Sometimes we know that they don't always reach to the forefront, but give me some of the worker stories that you're connected with, and how they've been able to turn the corner because of this.
There's a number of workers that we've helped. The story that I read in a newspaper, El Diario La Prensa, that really inspired this project was from a worker who was employed in a midtown restaurant, worked, under minimum wage for 12 to 15 hours a day. And when he complained to his employer said, "I'm going to call, ICE on you. I have the power here. You don't have rights. Good luck with this claim." And that really infuriated me. And I think it makes many of us that work in immigrant justice and workplace justice incredibly angry. That same person approached Make the Road New York, and with their support helped file a wage theft claim. And we've had countless stories like that where workers approach trusted organizations in their communities and try to seek redress.
As we talk about policy that possibly the public and others can wrap around, what are some of the things that we could be paying attention to, supporting and assisting in this endeavor?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have everyone ask their elected officials, what are you doing to tackle wage theft? There's a lot that the state can do. And we've tried to pass a SLET bill for some time to hold employers more accountable. And so if you have a state representative, assembly member, or senator that you're close with or that you're not close with, call them, ask them what they're doing to strengthen workers' rights, to strengthen the rights of immigrants and vulnerable workers. Ask them about the SLET bill, ask them how they're holding employers accountable and what they're doing to communicate changes in minimum wage statewide.
Yeah. I want to go back to Reclamo for a minute and just talk about the fact that you guys were able to actually be an awardee for the JMK Innovation Prize. And that was pretty huge.
That's right. We were recently awarded an innovation award. We're really honored to be James Kaplan Innovation Prize winners. This is a huge vote of confidence for the work that we're doing, for our approach to solving some of these problems or addressing them. It's not every day that you see a nonprofit that's building technology that uplift workers' rights and immigrants' rights. And so we're really thrilled and honored to have been recognized by James Kaplan, and hope that others, join our fight to help ensure that every worker, every immigrant in this country has their rights protected and is able to seek redress when they've been a victim of a crime or seeking access to justice.
We talk about the good work that you're doing. Talk to me a little bit about what do you find to be the primary challenge, particularly in this season right now?
I think right now with the election and fears around the rhetoric that many immigrants are hearing, I think it's a very uncomfortable climate for immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants. I think it's even tougher for folks to speak out and say, hey, I have a wage issue, I have an employment issue. The climate is very difficult. The climate is very anti-immigrant, and unfortunately, this problem is only going to get worse unless we change our approach to talking about it and our approach to helping people speak out when they've been victims of a crime.
Yeah, I didn't want to throw the elephant in the room out there, but I did want to talk about it, get your perspective. Yeah. I mean, this upcoming election is going to be pretty huge and critical. How do you see things playing out for you as we look towards 2024's election?
We don't participate in the electoral campaigns, but obviously as a nonprofit working with immigrant communities, it's really tough not to think about the 2024 election. I think from our perspective, we're trying to do our best to let immigrants and workers know what their rights are, let them know what is and isn't current policy, encourage them, let them know that there's a whole network and community of advocates out there here to help, here to support them, fight alongside them. And it's going to be a very tough year, but we're prepared to take on some of these challenges and help people make sure that they still have rights in this country and that we're here to protect and uphold those rights.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said there, and certainly when we look towards the upcoming elections, a lot of eyes and ears are going to be focused, particularly on the immigration issue, and then, of course, when we talk about workers' rights. And Rodrigo, you're right at the forefront. Thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out with us. And we got to bring you back.
Yeah, happy to come back.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, my brother. Good to have you.
Take care. Thank you.
All righty. Well, I want to let you know we come to the end of our show today. Great guests. Hope you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx Social Justice Forums. Now, listen, if you want to rewatch this week's episode, catch the recablecast right here on BronxNet.org. If you want to join the conversation, present your point of view, visit our social media at BronxNet TV. Join us next week. We're elevating the discussion and bringing further awareness to the issues across the globe. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, saying take care. God bless.